Hi guys, hope you're all keeping well. So, the topic for this video might not be the most exciting one, the most dynamic one, but it is important nevertheless. And specifically, it's the cost of charging your Porsche Taycan and where might be the cheapest way to do that. And I say might because there are an awful lot of variations depending on how you go about doing it. So, the first thing to note is I myself drive this car, and I also have two other combustion engine cars and two motorbikes as well. And the act of filling those up is incredibly straightforward. You rock up to a forecourt, you know what you're going to be paying in advance because you can see it quite clearly. You put the nozzle in, fill up, and you're on your way. And it's pretty standard nationwide. For sure, there are indeed regional variations depending on where you go about doing it. You know, prices tend to fluctuate a little bit, and of course the energy prices can spike all of a sudden given external circumstances, but on the whole you really do kind of know what you're going to be paying. It's very different for an EV. For sure, the act of plugging it in and letting the electrons flow is very simple, but the bit that goes on behind that, under the lid, under the hood, is far more complex. There's a lot of variations depending on where you do it, how you go about doing it, and just which provider you're using. Now, I want to try and dig into that a little bit on this video, understand a little bit just where might be the cheapest place for you to charge your Taycan. And the place we have to start with this is at home, I think. Now, of course, there are places that would allow you to charge for free. There is no denying that. I'm very fortunate in that I also get free charging at work. Thank you very much, work. And it's a real nice perk. It really does help. It's a nice little perk to have when you drive an EV, and there's plenty of destinations that you can go to that will allow you to plug in to their grid for free. Obviously, I'm not going to cover that on this video because that is effectively the cheapest way of charging, but assuming you don't have access to that, what do you then do? Well, I think everything good starts at home. So let's look at home charging. Home charging obviously depends on the cost, depends on your provider. And with the energy price cap at the moment, you're going to be paying 34 pence per kilowatt hour to charge your vehicle. Now, that is assuming that you don't have a fancy smart tariff or an overnight tariff that facilitates cheaper EV charging. And there's a few providers out there that do this. For example, Octopus Energy, they'll do that. I believe OVO have one as well. And what that does is essentially gives you access to cheaper tariffs between a set period of time, usually overnight, maybe between 12 and 3 or 12 and 6. The hours vary depending on the provider, for around about 10p per kilowatt hour. But you must remember that that bumps up your day kilowatt hour usage to around about 50 pence per kilowatt. I'm being general here. So you're going to be paying more for the energy that you use during the day for your daily business, such as running your computer, making your toast, boiling your kettle. So you have to do a bit of homework. You have to work out how much you use and how much for your normal day-to-day bits, and how often you charge your vehicle, to work out if moving to one of those tariffs is going to be effective for you. There's other tariffs as well that are even smarter, that when grid usage is low, they'll automatically start charging your car for as little as 7p per kilowatt hour. But you really have to do your homework here. Look at your provider, see what they're charging, see if moving to a smart tariff that allows, or an EV tariff as they're known, is going to provide you with that cheaper charging. For me, I don't use one of those because I don't do that much charging at home. So when I do, I just swallow the cost, because I definitely use more energy at home being myself and running my day-to-day toast making and kettle boiling facilities at home. So for me, I just have that flat tariff, pay 34p per kilowatt hour, and honestly that's not so bad. I mean, we have to look at energy prices as a whole here. Now, the Ford delivery contracts spike massively, the cost of those. So this is generating a megawatt hour of electricity. I think it went up from about 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds pre-crisis that we had in Ukraine to around about 500 megawatt pounds per megawatt hour, which is insane. And of course that caused energy prices to go absolutely through the roof. I remember the days when we were paying 10p per kilowatt hour. Very different indeed. So the forward deliverable contracts prices have come down again to a level not far off where they were pre-Ukraine. So fingers crossed we'll start to eventually, hopefully, see this bubble through, and perhaps even a reduction in energy unit cost per kilowatt hour. Who knows? It's difficult to say, but we can only hope and pray that it does improve, because honestly, energy prices at the moment, whether it's electricity or your gas, it's just, I've never seen anything like it, as I'm sure a lot of people watching are in the same boat too. So all we can do is keep our fingers crossed there. So that is pretty much charging at home. Now, talking about the manufacturers of EVs, very often they will provide you with an incentive. It could be a free charging pack or a preferential rate on your charging when you buy an EV. Now, there's another brand out there that, excuse me, I can't bring myself quite to mention. No, I can't do it. I might flash it up quickly in the subtitles there. That were providing free charging on their network for new customers back in the day, but they're reining that in a lot more now, nipping that in the bud, if you like, so that they're not offering that, and you're starting to have to pay a little bit more to charge on their network, even if you own one of their cars. And people that are on the free charging packages, they're trying to move them off that onto packages that are going to make them a bit more money. Now, with the Porsche Taycan, you get access, if you buy one from new, to the Porsche charging service for 3 years. And that provides you with preferential rates of 30 pence on the kilowatt hour on a specific subset of public chargers. And the cheapest of those is by far and away the Ionity chargers, but there's a huge catch with those, a huge caveat, and I'll come on to that in a bit, because we're going to have to start looking at a map to see what I'm talking about here specifically. So yeah, the Ionity network is by far and away the best. Now, with the Porsche charging service, they did, when this first launched, I understand before I had a Taycan, the Ionity network was included in this, as were things like BP Pulse, Shell Connect, and a few others as well. I think InstaVault might have been on there. But when you look at the map, the charging suppliers that will offer that preferential rate, it looks to me like it's become less and less. So there's less and less places you can charge at that preferential rate. And there is also another factor that you have to consider here when you're doing so, and that is that many of these places that you charge will have not just a charge per kilowatt hour, 30p per kilowatt hour, 31p per kilowatt hour, depending on what one you're using, but they also have what's called a service charge per minute. So you also get billed per minute that you stood there at the charges. So obviously, charging more slowly, you're going to spend longer there. But what you will see is that charging on a slower network incurs a lower cost per minute charge on that network. The rapid chargers tend to be a much higher cost per minute, obviously because you're not going to be there as long. I guess it costs more to provide the infrastructure to charge at that high DC rate, so you're going to be spending a little bit more there. So that is something that you have to consider. So let's cut to the maps here, the ZAP map and the Porsche charging map, so I can show you exactly what I'm referring to when I talk about the Porsche charging service, and that how it might not be as great as you first think it could be. I guess if you're looking at a long trip and you're using the PCM to plan your route, it will give you the best places to stop at and charge. So that is something something worth considering, using the PCM to do your charging journey, and that's something that we'll look at in another video. But let's cut to the map. Okay, so let's dig a little deeper here and reference what I was referring to during the in-car video. So if we take a look at ZapMap, if you have an EV, you'll know what ZapMap is. It is the go-to location for finding out about the UK charging facilities and all the networks that are available. So if we open up the desktop app here, you will see that there are indeed an awful lot of UK charging locations available. But don't forget, these aren't all necessarily aligned to the Porsche Charging Services preferred partners. Indeed, this is every EV charging location available in the UK that is known. So quite a lot. If I look at the stats here for UK charge points, you'll see that there are 23,000 locations available for charging your EV that are known, and obviously multiple devices at some locations, so you get more devices and more connectors. So quite a lot of locations there. If I look at the Porsche charging map here, you'll see it's freely accessible. If I go back here just to show you, if you go to the Porsche site, you can find e-mobility, or e-performance I should say. Click on the charge map here and it will start you off in Germany, obviously, Porsche being a German brand. But if we come over to the UK here and I zoom out a bit so I can consolidate the view here a little bit, you'll see again that there are roughly 23,000 locations, just as we saw in the Zap map. So there is no way that this is just the Porsche Charging Services location. This, I believe, is every single EV charging location available in the UK, not those that are just necessarily aligned to the Porsche charging service. So how do you find out about the Porsche charging service? Well, it is difficult. I honestly can't find an easy way to do this with a straightforward approach in what's given here, looking at all the filters. It doesn't seem to provide the ability to just lock into what is the Porsche charging services. So to do that, we need to cut to the mobile app, which does give a better overview. And if you do know how to do it in here, do let me know. And I know what you're saying, probably turn this on. Well, that's just for places where you drive to and charge when you get there, not charging locations per se. So in the mobile app, you will see here that you have a list of locations that are available for Porsche charging services. And note how few there are. You have to scroll around significantly to find those locations. And there's not as many as you would see in the Zap map or in the Porsche map. No way. So I think this app is showing you the locations that are only aligned to Porsche charging services. And this seems to get less and less. I believe BP is no longer an option here, and only some Shell locations are an option. So if we look also at the prices here, you will see that there is a 31p per kilowatt hour charge with an increasing service charge, that is by the minute, depending on the speed that you use. You'll even pay a service charge at a Porsche dealer charging location, as I discovered recently, well, last October, when I tried it out in Guildford. I was hit with not just the kilowatt hour charge, but on the service charge as well. Admittedly, it was a 350 kilowatt charger. But as you will see here on the bottom, Ionity is the cheapest charging provider, which is 30p per kilowatt hour and no service charge here. Sounds great, right? What is the catch? Well, there is a bit of a catch here. If I go back into Zap map here and then I scroll down to find Ionity and I select Ionity, apply that, watch what happens here. The map virtually dries up. Ionity locations, there is only a handful of these locations in the UK. Hardly any. These are the 350 kilowatt rapid chargers for which you'll charge very quickly. You'll pay 30p per kilowatt hour and no service charge. Indeed, there's one in Cobham. This looks like, yeah, that's Beaconsfield there. One towards Exeter. One out Chippenham there. One towards Newport. One in MK. But really not that many. Probably help you out a little bit if you're going on a long trip, but far from ideal. I mean, absolutely not a viable option for charging your Porsche Taycan 100% of the time should you use public chargers. So this is the catch here. This is the caveat that I mentioned earlier. It is a real challenge finding an Ionity charger. If we click on this one here, have a look. 6 points available, some connectors charging. It doesn't really give us a lot of specifics. I believe the Porsche app does give a little bit more information, but yeah, therein lies the problem. So You're going to have to use the Porsche app on your phone to find the locations that are approved for the preferred Porsche charging services rate. Bear in mind you will have to pay a service charge on most of those, except the Ionity charges, of which there are hardly any. So just something to note there. Okay, let's go back to the car. Okay, so hopefully that gave you a bit of a flavour of the charging variations that you have with an EV. All the different things you can do, all the different places you can charge. It's a minefield. It really is a minefield. And therein lies the problem. Why is it such a minefield? Why isn't it more standardised? Why can't the government get on board to do more? It's very easy with fuel. It's very consistent with fuel. So why isn't it the same with electric vehicle charging costs? I just don't know. Anyway, that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Do stay safe, stay well. See you on the next one. Bye for now.